अपने स्वास्थ्य की देखभाल करो क्योंकि ये वो जगह है जहां तुम्हें हमेशा रहना है। आज की दुनिया में हमारी कल्याण से रिलेटेड 70% समस्याएं लाइफस्टाइल के कारण होती हैं। इन्हीं सब समस्याओं से लड़ने के लिए क्रैक द वेलनेस कोड यानी कि CWC की शुरुआत सिलिकॉन वैली में की गई थी और अपनी इस अपार सफलता के बाद अब CWC इंडिया में आ रहा है IWC के नए रूप में। IWC यानी कि इंडस वेलनेस कोड ट्रस्ट अगले 5 सालों में IWC कम से कम 50 लाख देशवासियों की खुशहाली बढ़ाने का काम करेगी। इस मुहिम में सफलता के लिए हमारा मंत्र है एडुकेट, इंस्पायर, एम्पावर और इम्पैक्ट। एडुकेट यानी वेबिनार्स के जरिए हम आपको एक्सपर्ट से जुड़ेंगे जो कि आपको वेलनेस के विभिन्न आयामों पर जानकारी देंगे और इस जानकारी को अपने जीवन का हिस्सा बनाकर आप एक स्वस्थ और बेहतर जीवन जी सकते हैं। इंस्पायर यानी डॉक्टर्स, प्रैक्टिशनर्स और हमारे हेल्थ हीरोज के सपोर्ट से आपको वेलनेस के लिए प्रेरित किया जाएगा। एम्पावर यानी कि पार्टिसिपेंट्स को सपोर्ट ग्रुप्स, वेबिनार्स, वेलनेस रिसोर्स सेंटर और भी अन्य प्रकार की एक्टिविटीज से वेलनेस को अपने जीवन का हिस्सा बना सकते हैं। इम्पैक्ट यानी कि आप ना केवल अपनी खुशहाली के बारे में सोचें परंतु कुछ करें भी। इंडिया के इतिहासों में पहली बार एक वेलनेस रिसोर्स सेंटर खोला जाएगा। वेलनेस रिसोर्स सेंटर एक ऐसी जगह है जहां आपको कल्याण के 10 आयामों से संबंधित किताबें, वीडियो फिल्म्स और ऑडियो लेक्चर्स अवेलेबल होंगी। ये सब ज्ञानवर्धक ज्ञान का भंडार डॉक्टर्स और हेल्थ प्रोफेशनल्स द्वारा सुझाया गया है। जो कोई भी यहां पर आकर इन सेशन में शामिल होना चाहता है वो हमारी वेबसाइट thewellnesscode.org पर जाकर रजिस्टर कर सकते हैं और बाकी लोग इन सेशंस में ऑनलाइन शामिल होकर लाभ उठा सकते हैं। तो चलिए मिलकर ये वेलनेस यात्रा की शुरुआत करते हैं दोस्तों।
नमस्कार, आप सबका स्वागत है। आज एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण दिन में इंडस वेलनेस कोड जयपुर द्वारा आयोजित स्वास्थ्य के इस महत्वपूर्ण सत्र में, जिसमें आपके साथ हम रूबरू कराने जा रहे हैं एक ऐसी शख्सियत को जिनके लिए ये कहना वाजिब होगा कि उनके आते ही ऐसा लगता है आसमान से फूल बरस जाते हैं और दिलों में उत्साह जग जाता है। और ऐसी शख्सियत का आपसे रूबरू परिचय कराने के लिए मैं आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी क्रैक द वेलनेस कोड व इंडस वेलनेस कोड ट्रस्ट के संस्थापक श्री नरेन बख्शी जी, जो कि एक बहुत ही दूरदर्शी, नेतृत्व की क्षमतावान, अत्यंत ही सरल, सहज, कर्मठ व्यक्तित्व हैं और वे जिनकी की जन्मभूमि भारत और कर्मभूमि अमेरिका है, उनसे बेहतर ऐसे व्यक्तित्व का परिचय कौन दे सकता है जो कि उनके साथ यही जो गुण है वो शेयर भी करते हैं। तो नरेन बख्शी साहब, आपका स्वागत है, आपका बहुत बहुत आभार। आप सैन फ्रांसिस्को से हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं सुबह की इस कहना चाहिए मधुर बेला में, जबकि भारत में इस समय संध्या काल हो गया है। आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत, आभार जी। कृपया हमारे जो अतिथि हैं, जो आज के मुख्य वक्ता हैं, उनका परिचय हमारे दर्शकों से कराएं जी। बख्शी साहब।
Namaste from San Francisco. Today is great honor for me to introduce somebody that normally, at least in America, doesn't need any introduction, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. He is a professor associated with Harvard for 42 years, one of the top institutions in the world. He's an author, and as you will know today, an inspirational speaker who talks about things as a storyteller. He is highly accomplished doctor, but now he has become highly accomplished educator of educators. He is distinguished educator, dean of CME, which really means training doctors continuously. He has written many books. Some of them are really famous. They're bestsellers in the United States. And one of them, written with his brother, Deepak Chopra, is one of the best bestsellers ever. He is somebody that is talking about subject that is very dear to us. I want to tell you a tiny bit about my personal experience with him. He was with us at Crack the Wellness Code 2 years ago. Came there, I found him to be extremely humble. He is somebody that is 6 years younger to me. Lot of common things. He got married just like me at age 20. He has 3 children, just like me, and 2, what he was telling me, wonderful granddaughters. And he was saying when they talk with him like a nana, that is his day of joy. And somebody like that with us to talk about how we can be happy by finding a purpose in life. So, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, I've told you that after your speech in India Community Centers 2 years ago, that is what the word I use these days. My purpose of life today is health and wellness to support others. So I want to welcome you to talk about how everyone can find their own purpose in life. As you were saying, purpose in life does not have to be audacious. It needs to be meaningful to you that will make you happy. So welcome again, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra.
Thank you so very much for that very kind introduction. I'm delighted, honored, and humbled to be with all of you and to share with you reflections on something that I'm very passionate about. I happen to have also written a book about this with a friend and colleague, Gina Wild. It's called The 2 Most Important Days: How to Find Your Purpose and Live a Happy and Healthier Life. So if I could have the first slide. Great. So I'm trying to advance, but I'm unable to do so. Okay, let's try again. So it's not working. Can you hear me, Tushar? Okay.
You can control the.
So now, did you advance that, right? Why could I not advance it? It would be better if I can.
I send you the request to, have the control to this people.
All right, I guess I'll just have to say next, but stay on this slide for now. So I want to start by making a distinction between the terms happiness, joy, and bliss. You know, happiness is the sensation of feeling good. It's being pleased. It's an internal experience in which the goodwill is expressed outwardly. So if you're walking down the street and somebody is walking in the opposite direction to you, maybe they're looking at their iPhone and they're smiling, and you can tell they're happy. Joy is much more extreme. It's much more transient. It's a sense of exuberant sensation. And bliss is the experience of intense joy anchored by a sense of connectedness with others and with nature. It's been called perfect happiness or great joy. You know, if you and I want to witness bliss, all we have to do is go to a playground. And you see the children playing on the swings and the slides, and this 4-year-old boy bruises his knee, he is sobbing, a friend comes and consoles him, and 30 seconds later, he's back on the swings and in bliss. Next, please. So I'm unable to advance. If you can go to the next slide. Now, all the research has shown that, no, please go back. Go back one slide. So all the research has shown that meaningful experiences surpass the acquisition of expensive possessions in creating lasting happiness. So here on this slide, you see a luxury car, you see a huge mansion. And in the bottom half, you see a beautiful site that happens to be Milford Sound in New Zealand, one of the most beautiful scenic spots on this planet. I've had the good fortune of being there. And then on the right bottom, you see a charity event occurring. So if you buy a luxury car or move into a mansion, you'll be happy for a short period of time. And then most of us, 3 months, 6 months later, it's a car, it's a vehicle. It transports me, and you're happy it's a nice car. And it's a house, you live in the house, and you get used to it. This phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation. In contrast, meaningful experiences, taking part in a charity, going to a beautiful place, you actually don't even have to travel that far. You could have coffee with a friend at a coffee shop and talk about life, and that will create much more happiness. Next slide. Okay, whoever's controlling it, Tushar, I can't advance it, so you'll have to go to the next slide when I say next, please. Thank you. Wonderful cartoon here. It says it's not how big the house is, it's how happy the home is. Next slide. Okay, we'll have to go a little faster when I say next, please. Otherwise, this will take a long time. Now, let me ask those listening, how many of you have had a recent vacation? Now, when I say this to a live audience, a number of hands go up. I say, how many of you have a vacation coming up in the next 4 to 8 weeks? A few hands go up, and I turn to the rest and I say, what's wrong with you? Usually gets a chuckle. Then I say, those of you who have a vacation coming up, raise your hands again. And they raise their hands, and I tell everyone to look at them. And invariably, each one of them is smiling. Our thoughts make us happy. Anticipating an upcoming vacation with friends, family will make you happy. While on vacation, being in the present, enjoying every moment. Don't take 1,500 selfies. Enjoy the sunset, the sunrise, the aroma of coffee, a walk in the woods, a round of golf, going to a museum. When you come back, your best friends and family will say, how's that vacation? And as you're reminiscing about it, you'll feel happy. Next slide. Now, here's something amazing. Lottery winners. Somebody can use a scratch ticket, common in the United States, and win $10 million. Now, what happens to them a year later? They're back to their baseline. If they've spent it in acquiring expensive objects, wasted it in gambling, and it turns out the only lottery winners who are happy are those who've given away about 10% to a meaningful charity and partaken of meaningful experiences. Now look at this opposite, something that is horrific. Somebody gets a traumatic injury to the neck, the spinal cord is severed, and they're paralyzed for life. That actually happened to, next slide, Superman. He was an accomplished equestrian, and he was taking part in a race. Suddenly the horse buckled, and Christopher Reeves went flying over the horse and broke his neck. And for the first couple of months, he was not happy, he was miserable. But he had an amazing wife, dedicated friends, and he was very, very resilient. This is what he said before the year was over. I'm not living the life I thought I would lead, but it does have meaning, purpose. There is love, there is joy, there is laughter. Next slide. Rabindranath Tagore, as you all know, was an amazing poet. He wrote the poem Gitanjali in 1912 in his native language, Bengali. And then in 1913, he translated it himself into English. And that year, he got the Nobel Prize in Literature. Tagore once said, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." One of the best ways for us to be happy is to make others happy. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, Socrates claimed that his wisdom and insights arose merely in knowing that he knew nothing. And prior to him arguing it, it was believed that happiness was bestowed upon a select few. Who were these people? Royalty, nobility, poets, philosophers. And he argued, no, that's not true. Happiness is not just bestowed upon these select few, but can actually be begotten by human endeavor. And that happiness and virtue are inextricably linked. In fact, the ancient Greeks did not use the word happiness. They used a term called eudaimonia, which literally translated means human flourishing. If you're happy, you'll flourish in life. Next slide, please. We go to the next slide, please. Now I've come to the conclusion. Can we see the slides? Come to the conclusion that the happiest people on this planet we have the slides on. Have four things in common. And the first is that happy people have a cadre of good friends. Your friends are your chosen family. Robert Louis Stevenson said, next slide, a friend is a gift that you give to yourself. Next slide, Khalil Gibran once said, friendship is a sweet responsibility, never an opportunity. So there's an amazing study that's gone on now for almost 80 years. What study goes on for 80 years? Remarkable. Started a year before Hitler invaded Austria. And then the participants in the study went to war, they came back, they were re-enrolled in the study. 750 young men, 21 years of age. 250 went to Harvard. The other 500 were from very poor and dysfunctional families. Followed them every year. Yearly questionnaires, then physical examinations, blood tests, EKG, EEG, then home visits, interviewing the spouses. And now a cohort of their children, 2,000, are being followed in a similar study. Who was in that group? There were lawyers, doctors, 4 who ran for the US Senate, 1 who became America's president, John F. Kennedy. Some became Skid Row alcoholic derelicts. Some died of suicide. And the major conclusion of the study is that social connectedness, your relationship with friends, brings forth joy. Loneliness is toxic, and that your satisfaction with relationships at age 50 correlates with health, happiness, and longevity 3 decades later at age 80. Remarkable study. George Valiant wrote a book about this, Triumph of Experience. And next slide, Robert Waldinger, who is the current principal investigator of this study, has given a brilliant TED Talk. What makes a good life? Lessons from the longest study on happiness. I urge you to watch this TED Talk. Next slide. Now, the second trait of happy people is the ability to forgive. If you hold bitterness or rancor in your heart, you can never be happy. Anyone listening, if you're holding a grudge against an ex, a sibling, a parent, a neighbor, a colleague, my plea to you, get rid of it. And the moment you make that decision, you'll feel this enormous weight come off your shoulders. Next slide. Mahatma Gandhi once said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. And to me, the greatest example of forgiveness is Nelson Mandela, who served 27 years in prison. And when he's released, he's asked the question, Mr. Mandela, do you harbor resentment against your white captors? And he gave the most eloquent answer. He said, I have no bitterness. I have no resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. Next slide. He also said, as I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison, right? The prison of the mind. Next slide. So friends and forgiveness. The third trait I've derived from a quote by Albert Schweitzer, who was a physician, theologian, humanitarian, Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1952. And he once said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I'm certain of, the ones amongst you who will be truly happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. So I've distilled it, next slide, into 3 F's. The happiest people on this planet have friends, they're able to forgive, and they do things for others. Mentoring, nurturing, philanthropy, which we can define as love for humanity. But there's a 4th one, next slide, and it begins with G, and it's not God, it's gratitude. The word gratitude is derived from the Latin root gratia, meaning grace, graciousness, or gratefulness. And as you know, it's a highly prized tenet in Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist teachings. I'm defining gratitude as the experience of something positive gained, but coupled with the realization that somebody else was responsible for that gain. And I strongly believe that gratitude and compassion can be cultivated. A very simple way is with the regular practice of meditation. But there are other ways as well. You can start a gratitude journal. Put your name on it, buy a little notebook, call it your gratitude journal. And let's say every Sunday evening, as you're reflecting on what's in store for you the next week, What are the tasks? What are the meetings? What are some of the deadlines you have to meet? Reflect on what's transpired in the last 7 days and write down what you're grateful for. Next slide. This is an amazing study. It's called the Catholic Nun Study. So many, many years ago, 118 nuns joined the convent at Notre Dame, and the Mother Superior said to everyone, write down a little bit about who you are, what you're looking forward to. 60 years later, the researchers could authenticate their handwritings. And they took the statements these nuns had written. Remember, they were all 23. They live in the same convent. Nobody drinks, nobody smokes. They're all single. And they codified their statements into those expressing high gratitude and low gratitude. And you see two examples. Number one is low positive emotional gratitude. Number two is high positive. And you can see the words, happy. Now I look forward with eager joy to receiving the holy habit of Our Lady and to a life of union with love divine. So what happened? Next slide. On average, the nuns who expressed gratitude, next slide, lived 10 years longer. Positive emotional content in early life autobiographies strongly associated with longevity 6 decades later. So a pretty amazing study. Other studies have validated this kind of research. Next slide. Now here's an interesting ratio that approaches 3, named after, next slide, Marcel Losada, an economist. And what he said was that negative statements are more heavily weighted. If I say something negative to you, I now have to say 3 positive things simply to neutralize it. And this ratio has been found to be highly predictive of success as judged by metrics such as profitability. And a good ratio is between 3 and 6. Next slide. Here it's shown differently schematically, and you can see that individuals flourish if the number of positive statements to negative statements is between 3 and 6, whether they're college students, business teams, managers, leaders, nursing home residents. 1 is danger. And interestingly enough, 11 is danger. Too many positive statements per negative statement. I can only hypothesize that these perhaps are people with manic depressive syndrome, and they haven't been properly diagnosed and treated yet. Next slide. So some ancient reflections and emerging science about gratitude and happiness. Cicero said, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others. And Gardner said, to speak gratitude is courteous and pleasant, to enact gratitude is generous and noble, but to live gratitude is to touch heaven. Next slide. Now it turns out there's a happiness formula. And this is based on the study of monozygotic twins and comparing them to dizygotic twins. And what it says is that 50% of our happiness is genetic, so-called set point, like the thermostat in my room here. Interestingly enough, only 10% is living conditions. If you have running water and electricity, that's pretty good. Whether you live in the shanty towns of Joburg, the slums of Calcutta, or mansion in Beverly Hills, 10% living conditions. And 40% is voluntary action. So we have control over that 40%, perhaps the 10%, but more interestingly, even that set point. So if you express gratitude, if you meditate, if you exercise, behavioral cognitive therapy, all of that can increase that set point. Next slide. And by an astounding percentage. So here's Robert Emmons, who's considered one of the fathers of modern positive psychology. And he's written a wonderful book called Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. He randomized a large group and said for 6 weeks, every day, half of them were instructed to write down at the end of the day 3 things they did. And the other half to write down 3 things they were grateful for. And the group that regularly practiced grateful thinking, that set point increased by an astounding 25%. Next slide. Here's a wonderful book, How Social Recognition Empowers Employees and Creates the Best Place to Work. So some years ago, Google took their top managers to Costa Rica. 10 days, all paid vacation, expenses paid, golf, food, bring your significant other. And on average, it cost Google about $18,000 per top employee. In the previous years, they had given a $50,000 bonus. And then they were asked, what kind of bonus would you like in the future? A cash bonus or an experience like this? And a large percentage voted for a trip like they had in Costa Rica. Social connectedness brought forth joy. They made new friends. They had a wonderful time in a beautiful country. Right? So again, the social fabric of friendship. These were people they had met only on the internet or by email. Now they got to meet them, really enjoy and see what was in common in their lives. Next slide. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, he wrote a wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote it in 9 days. Very remarkable. It's one of the best books you can ever read. I urge you to read it. I read it literally every year in order to be continually inspired. And he once said, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. Next slide. Albert Schweitzer, again Nobel laureate, said, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you're happy, you'll flourish. You'll sleep better. You have a better immune system. You'll make better choices about your nutrition, about your exercise, about the kind of friends you want to have. James Rohn, a best-selling author, once said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose your friends carefully, but celebrate everything small or big with them. Next slide. I think the modern day philosophers are children. This is a 5-year-old girl, the daughter of a dean at Assumption College in Worcester, where I had given an iteration of this talk, and I urged people in the audience to ask their children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, to complete the sentence, happiness is. And when this dean asked a 5-year-old daughter, her 5-year-old daughter said, Mommy, happiness is when the heart feels bigger. I gave a version of this talk at surgical grand rounds at Harvard Medical School. And the person in charge of the residency program wanted to meet with me a week later to continue the discussion. We sat down, he said, Sanjeev, I have a son. He's 2 years and 10 months of age. And I asked him, what makes you happy? And he said, Daddy, I'm most happy when I'm sharing my toys with my friends. Next slide. John Lennon, the Beatle, was 5 years of age when he goes to school, and the teacher gives the kids an assignment. Write down what you want to be when you grow up. And he writes happy on the piece of paper and he hands it to the teacher. Next slide. And the teacher says, John, You didn't understand the assignment. And he looks up at the teacher and smiles and he says, and you don't understand life. 5 years of age. His mother, every night when she tucked him into bed, said, John, when you grow up, I want you to be happy. So kids are the modern day philosophers. They come up with the most amazing things. Next slide. But just as I consider children to be modern day philosophers, we can also learn immeasurably from the wisdom of beloved fictional characters. Next slide. Here you see Snoopy and Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown says, we only live once, Snoopy. And Snoopy says, wrong. We only die once. We live every day. What profound wisdom. Next slide. Now here's something that was taught to me by my then younger granddaughter. She's now turning 15, but she was 7 years of age. They live in New York. They come to Boston. They're staying with us for a week. And the first night we're about to have dinner. And she said, Nana, before we have dinner, we're going to play a game. I said, okay, Mira, what's up? She says, it's called Thorns, Buds, and Roses. I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. She said, I'll explain it to you, Nana. My thorn is that my cousin was coming for a play date and she couldn't come because her father got busy. Thorn, negative. My bud is she's coming tomorrow. And my roses are, you took us this morning for breakfast. Then you took me to Barnes and Nobles and you got me 3 books. And then Nana, after dinner, you're going to tell us a few stories. You're a pretty good storyteller. Now, if you notice, the ratio of roses was 3-to-1, Prasada's ratio for thorn. So you end on a positive note. And you can go around the room. Let's say you're having dinner with the family. Start with the youngest person and go around the room and say, what are your thorns, buds, and roses? Each one will speak for 30, 40 seconds. You're ending with gratitude, ending with something really positive. Brings forth a lot of happiness. Next slide. Look at this, wonderful. This is Winnie the Pooh and his friend. And she looks at Piglet and he says to her, if you live to be 100, I want to live to be 100 minus 1 day. So I never have to live without you. I wrote something about this and I was interviewed by BBC. I said, Dr. Chopra, you're a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and you're quoting Winnie the Pooh. And I used this quote. I said, yeah, look how beautiful and sublime this friendship is. We can learn a lot. Next slide. Now, some years ago, I thought, Siri has the answer to every question. So I asked the question, I said, Siri, next slide, what is the secret of happiness? And the answer came back, it is unequivocally chocolate. It doesn't do so now, but this was about 10 years ago. And next slide, I happened to be speaking at Mayo Clinic, Rochester, and I'm going to give a talk. And early in the morning, I wear my suit, I go to a coffee shop, I get my coffee, and I happen to glance at the shop next to it. And it's closed, it's 6:30 in the morning, but there's a sign in there. It says, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy chocolate, which is kind of like happiness. Next slide. Now, year after year, there's a survey about the happiest countries. The survey is not perfect, but nevertheless, pretty much every year, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Finland, Australia, Bhutan, Austria, Costa Rica, Singapore, Switzerland, New Zealand, and Canada are in that list. Denmark has been in the top #1 position for many, many years. So what's unique about these countries? Next slide. Let's think about Denmark. So Denmark, they work 35 hours a week. They have national health insurance. They respect the elderly. They participate in a very interesting social phenomenon called Huga. I think it still happens to some extent in India, but not in America. So Huga is that if I'm in your neighborhood, I don't pick up my iPhone and call you and say, are you home? Can I drop by for a cup of tea or coffee? I simply ring the doorbell. And if you're at home, you welcome me. We're good friends. We sit by the fireplace and we talk about life. Informal gathering of friends. It's also practiced in Norway in a setting that is cozy and comfortable. Couple of rules: no discussion of religion, no discussion of politics. Next slide. Now, happiness is more than the sum total of happy moments. So I talked about the 4 tenets: friends, forgiveness for others, and gratitude. But if you live with purpose, if you find your purpose and live it, you will have much more lasting and sustained happiness. Next slide. It's a beautiful quote, Mark Twain. So the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. Each one of us has a singular purpose in life. Next slide. Defining your purpose can come by reflecting on it or by virtue of a key moment in your life. Sometimes that key moment is starkly negative. It's horrific, yet it is momentous. And the person witnessing it has the fortitude, the grit, the compassion, love to say, this is unacceptable. I'm going to make a dent here. I'm going to make a difference here. Next slide. Most of us will experience sorrow. When you experience the abyss of sorrow and emerge stronger and with a clear purpose, you will have triumphed. Next slide. One can find purpose in the most horrific circumstances. This is Viktor Frankl again. He said, we who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked to the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man. But one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Next slide. The Buddha once said, every life has a measure of sorrow. Sometimes it is this that awakens us. Next slide. Now here on the screen, you see a very happy individual. He's about my age. And I had the good fortune of meeting him some 15 years ago at a leadership course. He's from the country Colombia. His name is Jaime Aramillo, but he's a national hero, and hence the term Papa Jaime. So some 42 years ago, in his 20s, he's standing at a street corner in Bogota. And across the street, there's a sewer. And there's an underground, almost like a small city with the sewer. And these orphans live there. And he's saying to himself, I got to do something about these orphans. And a beautiful 7-year-old girl emerges and is looking at him and smiling. And as they're having this interchange, a car comes around the corner of the street, stops in the middle of the street, the window rolls down, somebody tosses a toy, the car recedes. This 7-year-old girl has never possessed a toy. She comes running, picks up from the middle of the street the toy. She's looking at Jaime Aramillo and beaming with joy. And as they're having this interaction, a speeding truck comes around the corner and smashes her into oblivion. And he says to himself, this is it. This is my calling in life. This is my purpose. I'm going to adopt, take care of these kids. He is adopted, housed, schooled, and fed more than 52,000 orphans. National hero, Papa Jaime. Next slide. Joseph Campbell once said, "Follow your bliss and doors will open where there were no doors before." Wonderful series on public television in the States with Bill Moyers interviewing Joseph Campbell. Wrote a wonderful book, A Hero's Journey, The Power of Myth. Very learned, blissful individual. Next slide. Now, some of you may have heard of this remarkable individual, Abreu. He was honored with an honorary doctorate at Harvard some years ago. 2 people received the honorary doctorate. One was Abreu from the country Venezuela, and the other one was Oprah Winfrey. An economist. Abreu died a couple of years ago, but many, many years ago on a lark, he took 9 poor kids off the street and taught them classical music. Next slide. We'll skip this, but you can go to YouTube and watch El Sistema, and you'll be mesmerized. Next slide. There are now 400,000 children in Venezuela performing classical music. 90% come from poor families. They would be in gangs. They would be using drugs, perhaps. They'd be dead, perhaps. And some years ago, a troupe from El Sistema, which means the system, subsidized by the Venezuelan government, performed in Vienna. And the critics said, the Vienna Philharmonic said, this is the best performance of the year. On this picture, you see Gustavo Dudamel. He's one of the offspring of this program. And at age 27, he became the conductor of the LA Philharmonic, one of the most celebrated conductors in the world. To me, this also answers the question of what is more important, nature or nurture. I think both are important, but nurture is amazingly powerful. Next slide. Now, here are 5 things you see on the screen. I should have said I love you more often. I should have had the courage to pursue my dreams and aspirations. I should have traveled more. I should have been the bigger person and said, I'm sorry. I should have spent more time with my friends. Who says these things? I think you know it. These are people in hospice facing imminent death. So a nurse who interviewed about 1,000 people said, what are your greatest regrets in life? Nobody said, I should have lived in a bigger mansion. I should have worked harder, made more money. I should have belonged to 3 country clubs. These are the greatest regrets. The point is, we have to be doing this now. Let us not have any of these regrets down the road on our deathbed. Next slide. I think you all know her. She's now a little older, Greta Thunberg. Next slide. She found her purpose in life. An amazing young lady, political activist, seeking to stop global warming and climate change, has spoken at all the major forums, has met prime ministers, presidents, chancellors, statesmen. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a couple of years ago. She didn't get it. She would have been the youngest at age 16 had she received it. There's no doubt in my mind that she will receive it in the next year or 2. Next slide. She once said, next slide, please. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as though your house is on fire, because it is. Now look at this inspired leadership during coronavirus. This made it to the cover of Forbes magazine. And you can see 7 inspiring leaders. I think one of the greatest leaders right now is from New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. She was also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a couple of years ago. She will undoubtedly receive it. And what you notice, of course, here is that they're all women. Women can often be much more nurturing, much more collaborative in their leadership. Next slide. Here's another young person whom I happen to know, Jennifer Staple. She was 19 years of age, pre-med student, and she does an ophthalmology elective. She's going to go into medicine at Yale, and she's saddened to see people who've grown blind from preventable and treatable causes of blindness. Who are these people? Poor people. New Haven, West Haven, Connecticut. So she goes back and with 29 other students forms an organization called Unite for Sight. In the last 15 years, they have performed more than 90,000 sight restoring surgeries, seen more than 1 million patients. She has 4,000 volunteers, nursing students, medical students, web designers, professors of ophthalmology. She got admission to Stanford shortly after she had started her organization, Unite for Sight. And she wrote to the Dean of Admissions and said, can I defer for 2 years? I have to work for my organization 80 hours a week. And he wrote back, Jennifer, take your time. When you're ready, we'll be ready for you. Amazing, young, inspirational leader. Next slide. We're going to conclude shortly. This is Adam Braun, studying at Brown, one of the top Ivy schools in America. Semester abroad, travels to many countries in Africa and Asia. And on a lark, every time he's in a country, he picks an 8, 9-year-old kid off the street and through an interpreter asks a question. If you could have one wish in the world, what would it be? Next slide. And this 8-year-old girl in a country in Africa says, to dance. Next slide, please. And he says, ask her again, any wish in the world. And she repeats, to dance. Goes to another country. Can we see the next slide, please? Asks the same question of another 8-year-old girl. And she answers, for my mother to be healthy, hold my hand and walk me to school. Can we advance to the next slide? And he goes to India and he meets an 8-year-old beggar, begging outside of school. Same question. You can have one wish in the world, what would you want? And the boy, through a translator, says, a pencil. He says, what? You can have any wish in the world. A pencil? And this beggar sees these kids come out of school. They sit on the wall next to where he's begging. They open their notebooks. They have a pencil and they're drawing and they're writing and they're hugging and they're laughing and they're happy. And he thinks his ticket to happiness is a pencil. So Adam Braun buys hundreds of pencils, and every country he goes to thereafter, he doles out pencils to kids on the street. He comes back to New York. He's haunted by the image of this 8-year-old boy. All he wanted was a pencil. So he decides to start a foundation, promise of a pencil, to build one school in Africa. He has now built more than 200 schools across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Forbes magazine has rated him as one of the most influential people in the world under the age of 30 years of age. He found his purpose in life with that one interaction with the 8-year-old beggar boy in India. Next slide. I'm going to finish with the Starfish Parable. Your and my purpose in life doesn't have to be that bold and audacious, like a Papa Jaime, like a Muhammad Yunus, like Jennifer Staple, like Adam Braun. So there's this young girl walking on a beach where there are 10,000 starfish stranded. She picks one, twirls it, throws it into the ocean, picks another one, twirls it, throws it into the ocean. As she's walking, there's a man sitting, an old man sitting in a rocking chair on the beach, smoking a pipe, reading a book. He says, young lady, come over. So she walks over. Says, what are you doing? There are 10,000 starfish stranded on the beach. Look across, there's another beach. Another 15,000 starfish stranded. Do you think you're making a difference? So she picks a starfish, twirls it, throws it into the ocean. Starfish swims away. She looks at the old man, smiles and says, it made a difference to that one. We can all make a difference in very simple and nurturing ways. Next slide. I'm going to conclude by sharing with you my purpose in life, which is to fulfill my dharma, to teach medicine, to teach about health, about leadership and happiness, to do it grounded in humility and with an ardent desire to learn every single day, to express gratitude and celebrate my family, friends, colleagues, students, and patients who inspire me in countless ways. And in some small measure, inspire everyone I meet on this amazing life journey. Next slide. I invite you to reflect on what gives you the greatest joy, resonates for you. Take a few minutes now, later, reflect on your purpose, write it down. You may wish to share it with your closest family members and your chosen family, your closest friends. It is my fervent hope that you have already found your purpose in life, or that you will find it, and it will lead to lasting happiness, and it will light up every day of your life. Thank you so very much for your attention. I'm happy to hear comments or take your questions.
थैंक यू डॉक्टर संजीव चोपड़ा जी, बहुत अच्छा आपने जो ये वक्तव्य दिया है, इसने हमारे को एक नया दृष्टिकोण दिया है। कहते भी हैं दृष्टि बदलती है तो सृष्टि भी बदल जाती है। There is a saying, vision is an art to see what is invisible to others, and if you can find the vision and the purpose of your life, you can create really something very great for the humanity. So कुछ प्रश्न जो हमें आपके टॉक के दौरान मिले हैं, वो मैं आपसे साझा करना चाहूंगी। एक प्रश्न आया था कि क्या आप बता सकेंगे कि हम बच्चों में ग्रैटिट्यूड कैसे इनकल्किकेट कर सकते, कैसे उनमें बढ़ा सकते हैं? हाउ कैन वी मेक देम अंडरस्टैंड कि आभारी होना कैसे भार मुक्त होना है?
Very good question. I think the answer is that you have to lead by example. So the adults in the family have to be constantly expressing gratitude, saying thank you to the waitress, thank you for serving us, thank you for your smile, thank you for being so attentive. Somebody opens the door for you as you're walking. Thank you. The person who handles your luggage at the airport, say thank you, express gratitude. You know, you have to lead by example. There's a wonderful story of Mahatma Gandhi where he's sitting in his ashram and his mother walks in. She walks 8 or 10 miles in the dust and the heat with her 12-year-old son. She says, Gandhiji, look at my son. He's gained so much weight. He's eating a lot of sugar. He adores you. He worships you. He'll do anything for you. Please tell him not to eat sugar. And Gandhiji looks at the boy and he says, come back in a week. So they go away. A week later, they return again, walk in the dust and eat. And Gandhiji looks at the boy, son, don't eat sugar. It's not good for your health. And the boy says, Gandhiji, from this moment onwards, I have given up sugar. And he leaves the room. And the mother stays behind. And she says to Gandhiji, thank you for saying that to my son, but can I ask you a question? We were here a week ago, and you could have said the same thing to my son then. And Gandhiji whispers into her ear, at that time, I had not given up sugar. Right? It's not do as I say, it's do as I do. That's leadership by example. So adults have to lead the way for the children to follow. But one very simple way is at the dining table. I think we should get back into the habit of eating together, even if it's one meal in the day. We find people are working so hard, things are fragmented. But I remember growing up, my father was this brilliant physician, cardiologist, and he would work from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening. But we never had dinner till he came home. And we would sit down at 8:39, and my mother, father, my brother Deepak and I would have dinner. I can never forget that. So I think when you're sitting down for dinner, play that game. Thorns, buds, and roses. Go around the group. That's expressing gratitude. What's your thorn? What's your bud? Tell me your 3 roses. And you end with gratitude. You know, there's a lot of committees now. And I do this if I'm chairing a committee. 8 people. Before we start, it's a one-day retreat. Before we start, I say, can we go around the room? And everyone in 30 seconds tell us something they're grateful for that transpired recently in their lives. Everybody says something that they're grateful for. You know, the meeting starts at a much higher level, from a level of happiness, clarity.
Very true. इसमें एक बात और जोड़ना चाहूंगी कि कई बार होता है कि कुछ लोगों ने हमारे साथ कुछ बुरा किया होता है या कुछ परिस्थितियां ऐसी होती हैं, तो उसमें भी यदि हम अपने मन में ये विचार रखते हैं कि ये जो कुछ भी हुआ बहुत अच्छा किया, जिन्होंने बुरा किया बहुत अच्छा किया, एटलीस्ट उन्होंने हमारे अंदर जो हमारी कैपेसिटी है उसको उन्होंने एक नई ऊंचाई दी, क्योंकि हमें नहीं पता कि हमें कितने गुण हैं या जो हमारे हैं. So like it said कि एक दरवाजा बंद होता है तो दूसरा खुल जाता है, तो वो खुलने के लिए देखने के लिए बहुत है. और इसलिए we should be grateful to everyone who has put the hurdles in our life so that we could make a staircase of it and rise above it.
How beautifully said. Beautiful, beautiful. So in every adversity is the seed of greater success. Rumi, the great Sufi mystic and poet, once said, the wound is where the light enters you. The wound is where the light enters you. If everything was going comfortably in life, we would never achieve greater success. We have to have failure. We have to face adversity. We have to be wounded. We have to experience sorrow. Then we can emerge. If you're angry at the person who offended you or said something nasty to you, it's really not a reflection on you, it's a reflection on them. They said that or did that from their level of consciousness. And we have to rise above that and forgive them. Not easy to do. You know, as Gandhiji said, the weak can never forgive. It is an attribute of the strong. And Nelson Mandela, I harbor no resentment or bitterness. Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies. The Buddha said, resentment is like holding a hot coal with the intent of hurtling it at the person who offended you. That person's moved on. Meanwhile, you're burning your hand. Not easy to do. You don't have to forget, but you can forgive.
वेरी ट्रू. बहुत सही कहा आपने. जैन्स में एक पर्यूषण मतलब कि शुद्धि का पर्व होता है, उसकी शुरुआत ही होती है क्षमा से और जो अंत होता है क्षमा से. तो वो भी इसी से है कि जब तक आप अपने मन को खाली नहीं करेंगे, दूसरे को क्षमा नहीं करेंगे, उसे फॉरगिव नहीं करेंगे, तब तक आप फॉरगेट नहीं हो सकते। तो ये बहुत जरूरी है, दूसरे से मांगने के पहले अपना जो बैंक है उसको, अपनी जो पोटली है उसे खाली कर दें और अपने मन को शांत और निर्मल बना लें, तभी आप दूसरों को और इस दुनिया को एक अलग नजरिए से देख पाएंगे। एक और प्रश्न जो बहुत ही आया कि लोग कहते हैं कि आपने तो बहुत अच्छे से बताया और कईयों ने अपने जो जीवन के मकसद को प्राप्त भी किया, तो क्या करें, कैसे देखें कि हम अपने जीवन के जो पर्पस है, जो इसके लिए हमारा जन्म हुआ है, उसको हम जान सके, पहचान सके? कुछ इस पे प्रकाश डालिए।
So, it will come to you. Your purpose will come to you if you reflect on it. And I have a wonderful friend. We're good family friends. And I said to her, Susie, what's your purpose in life? And she said, oh, very simple. My purpose in life is to be the best mother and grandmother for my children and grandchildren, to be a loyal and good friend, and to tend my garden. Beautiful purpose. But the other way, which I teach in a workshop with a good friend of mine, Adrian Wilkins, very spiritual. We do Gita study together. He's brilliant. Is take 30 3x5 cards. Okay. So 30 cards, 3x5 cards. Every day for the next 30 days, at the end of the day, write down 3-4 things you did that day and give it a rating from 1 to 10. Where 1, you were very, very unhappy, you were miserable. 10, if you're lucky, you were in bliss. There'd be lots of 2, 3s, 4s, a lot of 5, 6, 7, 8. At the end of a month, line them up and cancel everything from 1 to 5. Look at 6, 7, 8, 9. That made you happy. That gave you joy, maybe even bliss. Your purpose is lurking in there. If what made you happy was volunteering, traveling, writing a book, mentoring, nurturing, being more philanthropic. I was asked to give a talk on philanthropy. And I said, we can define philanthropy as love for humanity. And philanthropy is one of 3 T's. Most people think philanthropy is writing a check or donating money. No, no, no. It is one of 3 T's. One of them is money, treasure, but the other is time, and the third is talent. And if you find you're doing that and you're happy, that's your purpose. Start living.
Very true, very true. इसी को कहते हैं कि अगर आप आंख बंद करें और ये सोचे कि ये आपका आखिरी पल है, तो आपके मन में क्या विचार आते हैं? तो शायद हम ये चाहे कि हमने बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जो हम अगर एक ही मिनट बचा है जिंदगी का, तो हम क्या करना चाहेंगे? और उसी को इस तरह से बढ़ाते हुए कि अगर 1 दिन है, 6 घंटे हैं, कुछ है, तो मेरे ख्याल में हमें काफी कुछ मिल जाता है कि हमारे जीवन की जो सबसे बड़ी खुशी होती है वो अपनों का साथ होती है, जो कि आपने बहुत ही सुंदर तरीके से बताया था कि जो जितने भी मरीज थे या जो थे जिन्होंने जिंदगी के आखिरी दिन के पास में थे, अपना सफर खत्म होने वाला था, उन्होंने किसी ने भी भौतिक सुख की चाह नहीं की थी, उन्होंने सबने यही चाहा था कि उनको अपने परिजनों का साथ शायद कुछ और मिल पाता। बख्शी साहब आपसे कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं? बख्शी साहब जी।
तो एक कमेंट करना चाह रहा हूँ संजीव जी, फॉर दिस टीम। तो दिस टीम इंक्लूडिंग डॉक्टर रश्मि, our people like Smriti, Sneha, Tushar, Wing Commander Kala, all of us together have found common purpose. So sometimes if you can find a common purpose when you're working together, that makes it even 10 times bigger.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. By the way, that same thing happens because you have a kinship, because you have a common purpose, that everything you do as an organization, foundation is aligned to that purpose, and it brings you happiness and joy. I'm reminded of how giving you are. Actually, amazing what you have started. And there's a wonderful quote by Saint Francis of Assisi. I've been to Assisi. And he once said, "For it is in the giving that we receive." How simple and beautiful a statement. For it is in the giving that we receive. He also had one of my favorite quotes. He said, "Preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words." Wow. Right? Talk is cheap. We can talk, but unless we're doing it and living it. Again, Gandhiji's example of that 12-year-old boy. I had not given up sugar then. So we have to do that. And we do it with friends and with people like-minded. It takes it to another level. I have meditated with 6,000 other men at Maharishi International University in Iowa. And it's an unbelievable experience, 2 weeks. But if I meditate with my wife as opposed to alone, it's different. If I meditate with another couple, 4 of us sit on the deck. They've all learned meditation. We meditate together. Go to a retreat, meditate with 60 people. It's much more powerful. So it's the collective consciousness of the people that comes into play. With your foundation, with the wonderful work you're doing, with an amazing team that you have.
So Sanjeevji, please accept our request to become part of this team, to help us, guide us as advisor. We'll be bringing you back in Silicon Valley again. So I hope you will just accept my request.
I humbly accept.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
एक प्रश्न है आपसे कि जो अभी हमारे एक दर्शक ने हमें दिया है कि आप ने कहा कि पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड जो है वो हमें काफी कुछ मदद करता है अपने गोल को प्राप्त करने में, तो ऐसा क्या कर सकते हैं कि one can be in a positive attitude of mind all the time despite of all the adversities, because during the time of adversities and low, when you are feeling low, how can you remain positive?
So there's a number of things you can do. If you're feeling low, smile. Even a fake smile will bring you happiness. Thich Nhat Hanh, brilliant Vietnamese monk, he's been a keynote speaker for me at Harvard Medical School. What an experience. He's now 93. And he said, sometimes your joy can be the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Isn't that amazing? So if you're feeling low, smile. If you're feeling low, exercise. Make sure you take vitamin D3. Drink some coffee. You might feel more perked up. Okay, reach out to somebody else. Reach out to your friends, even by Zoom. Do something nurturing. See a homeless person on the street, don't even ask them. Or maybe you ask them and go to the coffee shop, get them a sandwich, water, coffee. Make you happy. You know, there's a saying, I had the blues because I had no shoes till I saw a man who had no feet. We're always comparing ourselves, right? We're unhappy because we're comparing ourselves with the neighbor or somebody else or a sibling. Why has he done so well? Why is he so happy? We have to get rid of that. Happiness is an inner joy,
So Sanjeevji, I also want to let you know that Dr. Rashmi Jain is a practitioner of laughing yoga. And that's the things she does.
Wonderful.
When we have team meeting, we end them by laughing. So today, I want to make sure Rashmi ji will lead 30-second laugh for all of us.
Good. Let's do it.
Before that, I would like to say there is a very small, sweet word starting with S, ending with S, and with a distance of miles in between.
Yeah.
Rightly guessed, it is smiles.
There's one other thing I want to mention before I forget. All the slides that were shown, let's make it accessible to anyone, and they can use them, they can modify them, they don't have to give me attribution. I share all my slides on my medical talks, happiness, leadership, microbiome, on and on. And I call it copy left.
So nice of you. So nice of you. यही कहते हैं कि जो संस्कार आप छोड़ के जा सकते हैं आने वाली पीढ़ी के लिए, वो यही वर्षा है, यही वसीयत है जो आपकी निशानी छोड़ जाती है। और इसके साथ ही अब समय हो चला है। वैसे तो हमें इच्छा नहीं होती है कि हम आपको छोड़ें या आपसे सुने नहीं, समय लगता है ठहर सा जाए और हम आपसे बात करते रहें और आपके जो अनुभव के मोती हैं उनका लाभ लेते रहें। हम अपने सत्र को यहीं पे समाप्त करना चाहेंगे। इसके पहले मैं आमंत्रित कर रही हूँ हमें मैनेजिंग ट्रस्टी काला साहब को कि वे आए और औपचारिक रूप से धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करें और हमारे दर्शकों को बताएं हमारे आगामी प्रोग्रामों के बारे में। बहुत बहुत आभार, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका, आपने इतना समय दिया उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. And thank you, Dr. Chopra, for such a wonderful exposure that we got today on reflections on happiness and living with purpose. I think a lot of us will put more focus on gratitude going forward, and now that we understand how important gratitude is. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now, you brought in that fourth factor, gratitude, besides friends, forgiveness and for others. So we need to inculcate that feature of the practice of gratitude. And when I go back to my childhood, I am reminded, when we were kids, on our birthdays, we were told to go and put something in the temple or go and give, a piece of bread to a urchin or a beggar or give it to a cow. So we were taught the art of giving by rote. I think over a period of time, we somehow let it go. Because now when you see kids, it's all get. You get a birthday cake, you get a birthday gift. That giving part somehow has gone away. So I think we need to bring that back and, teach it to our children right from their childhood. And then you talked about living with purpose. I think you explained so well, how can one find one's own way of living with purpose? And once you have found your, what's the purpose of your life, I think that's another most important days besides the 2 days that you talked about. So from there onwards, thank you so much, Dr. Chopra. And as Mr. Bakshi spoke to you, we really look forward to have your blessings on an ongoing basis, to benefit our partners, listeners, audiences. Thank you so much. And now can I share my screen, Tushar? So we'd like to thank our partners who help us bring these programs on an ongoing basis. So we have, a strategic partner in IHMR University. Then we have community partners, which include universities, businesses, other organizations which are doing philanthropic work. We have area development partners, corporate wellness partners, NGO partners, and wellness partners who help us take our message far and wide. Then we have a team of doctors comprising Dr. Sheila Nambiar and Dr. Sudhir Bhandari, who are our advisors. We all heard Dr. Rashmi Jain just now. And then we have Dr. Sunil Jain and Dr. Chavi Mehra. Our pro bono partners who help us meet all legal requirements and other financial requirements in terms of, whatever the laws of the guideline demand. This is the management team of our trust. You all heard Mr. Bakshi introduce Dr. Chopra, then having Commander Kala, and then we have Mr. Somnath Chatterjee. While Mr. Bakshi and Mr. Chatterjee are based in Silicon Valley, I am based in India, in Pune and Jaipur. We have, associated core team of advisors. Jitendra Gautam takes care of alliances and partners. Mr. Harminder Multani, strategy and PR. Mr. Adi Gurudas, advisor, and Ms. Arushi Jain, digital content advisor. We have our ambassadors and Mr. Mayur Pratap Sharma, who was also ex-chairperson of TIE Global. Mrs. Neeta Bushra, she is founder chairperson of FICCI, for Ladies Wing. Then we have Major General CP Singh, who is also an health hero. And then we have our support team, Sneha Vasist, who is also a clinical psychologist. Then Smriti Meghwal, a social scientist. Devendra Rathadia, Umardin Khanji, and Mr. Tushar Garg, who helps in the technical matters. Our next program, which is on 31st October Day, which also happens to be Lawyers' Day, is focused on consumer protection in online era. So this is part, as we have been talking about, we have defined 10 areas of wellness, and this particular topic is under the legal wellness area that we are focusing on. So please come and join us. We'll share more details as we go forward. Our website is thewellnesscode.org. Please come and patronize us, visit us, guide us, help us make suggestions. What more can we do? We can also be reached on 733-995-1157. You can write to us on info@thewellnesscode.org. And please come and visit our YouTube channel, where all our past presentations are available to you, so that you can benefit from them, share it with your friends, and so that the message goes far and wide. And before I close, thank you so much, viewers, for joining in. Thank you so much, Dr. Chopra, for your blessings of your time. Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. Thank you, Mr. Bakshi, and thank you, team. Thank you, thank you, everyone. Jai Hind.
It's time for laughter.
Yep, before I finish, we finish on laughter note. My apologies, Rashmi. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, so we all will laugh together. A hearty laughter.